This isn't an official meeting, but I'd ask you to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I'm going to begin with a brief statement, and then the city manager will probably make a comment, and then we'll transition almost immediately to the first of our two interviews this evening. Just to be clear, there will not be discussion or deliberation about the interviews this evening, simply question and answers to the candidates. So first, I want to thank those community residents who chose to participate in tonight's meet and greet and candidate interviews. City staff and council encourage you to fill out comment cards that are on the back table. Once they are completed, they can be placed in the basket to the left. Each comment card will be scanned and distributed to my council colleagues in advance of our next council meeting on November the 13th. Additionally, I want to welcome Chief Lewis from the Muskegon Public Safety Department and Deputy Chief Hart from the Novi Police Department. Gentlemen, we're delighted to have you with us. I also want to acknowledge and thank every individual who submitted an application to be our next police chief. I can acknowledge without hesitation that the pool of candidates was stronger and more diverse than it was the last time we initiated this process in the spring and summer of 2012. Clearly, there were many individuals who were well suited and prepared for this position. Let me acknowledge and thank the members of the hiring task force, City Manager Campbell, Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, Council Member Seo, Chelsea Chief Ed Toth, and Commander Marlene Radzik from the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. In addition to scrutinizing every application and preparing thoughtful, precise questions for the candidates, the greatest strength of the hiring committee came from the more than 5 decades of professional, command-level public safety experience that 3 of our members possessed. I have no doubt that that strengthened and enriched our process. Finally, the Mercer Group, our consultant, has provided professional support, including the production and distribution of promotional materials, conducting phone interviews, and coordinating face-to-face interviews with the finalists. The City of Saline greatly appreciates their support and assistance. While some may debate this point, I believe that next to the city manager's position, the chief of the Saline Police Department is perhaps the most critical, most important staff position we are responsible to fill. Additionally, I have no doubt that either Mr. Hart or Mr. Lewis would do an outstanding job leading our department, maintaining a standard of excellence, and taking it to the next level. However, the choice before us is to determine who would be a better fit to move our department forward. As such, I look forward to a robust discussion with the 2 finalists and my council colleagues this evening, and I'm hopeful that we can consider extending a conditional offer to one of these 2 gentlemen at our next regular council meeting on November 11th. Mr. Campbell, is there anything that you would like to add at this time?
Just as an FYI to the council, obviously there's no one from the Mercer Group here, it was because of the changing of the dates, and so certainly our cost would be modified. So that was the one thing that we would have been this visit here, so that would be our last invoice would be modified to reduce that. So, which is fine, they provide a lot of great information, that great process.
Very good. Thank you. We are going to invite Mr. Hart to the table in front of us. Mr. Lewis, we're going to excuse you, and we will invite you back in about an hour. Deputy Chief, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Council.
To your left there's some more water, should you need it. Mr. Hart, this is how we're going to proceed this evening. I'm going to start to my left with Councilwoman Mitchell and end with Councilmember Seo. I will likely go last in asking questions, although there's a chance I may not ask questions. As the chair of the hiring committee, I've had ample opportunity to review your credentials and to ask you questions, and I want to make sure that those council members who are not part of the hiring committee have ample time to engage with you and understand your credentials and the strengths that you would bring to this position. So this is how it's going to work. Councilwoman Mitchell has 2 questions. Each council member has at least 2 prepared questions. If there are deficiencies in your answers or things that they'd like to follow up on, they will do that. Once they've completed their question, we will transition, and again, we'll begin with Councilwoman Mitchell, and with Councilmember CO. Before we begin, do you have any questions for us, sir?
I do not.
Excellent, okay. Councilwoman Mitchell, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Deputy Chief Hart. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And I just, for our audience, we have a group of questions. I don't consider these being asked in any type of particular order. So my question has to do with the subject of inclusivity. I would first like to know, when you hear that word, what does that mean to you?
To me, it means being all in, both with my family, both at the police department and throughout all departments in the community, to make sure that the department is transparent, to basically encourage inclusivity with other members of the community, with all members of the community, I should say. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind is immersing myself into this community and making sure that everyone in this community knows about their police department.
Thank you.
If I may, would you mind pulling that microphone a little bit closer? Mr. Hart, thank you very much. Yes, we are actually recording this, and it will be broadcast on Channel 18 so that our constituents, our residents, get a flavor for your credentials as well as the other gentleman who is competing for this position.
Thank you.
Please, sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Your Honor. As a follow-up question, Mr. Hart, what are some of the ways that you could bring some more inclusivity to our police force? I don't know if you need to speak with past experience or with a vision for that question.
Well, I think that certainly partnering with the community is very, very important. It has been something I've focused on for 26 plus years as a professional police officer in another community. Part of that would be making sure that we have community programs in place. When someone goes off on vacation, I want them to feel comfortable to either coming here into the police department and filling out a form with the dates that they're going to be gone, or getting online and doing it, whichever they're comfortable. And I would like to have staff members keep an extra eye on that home. I want to do some programs with the students here in Saline. There are more similarities between our two communities than there are differences. And one of the glaring similarities is the strength of the schools and the partnerships that your community has with the school district. So that's very, very important to me as someone that started a school resource officer program back in 2000. Probably one of the most rewarding experiences that I'll have in my life. It's I still have children that I call them kids that I see at church that were in the high school when I was there for 4 years. Now they have children. And to make those bonds. So I want to come up with programs that is going to give police officers and residents in this community, especially our younger adults, opportunities to get to know each other and be transparent and build those relationships. One of the things that we just did Monday night was Paul Glantz, who also has Imagine Theaters here in Saline, is kind enough to open up his theater to us, and we started this about 14 years ago on election night, the eve of election. The kids are off the next day, so we brought about 600 kids from Novi and Walled Lake and surrounding communities into the theater for $10. We donate the money to charity, and police officers, firefighters, and our CERT teams keep an eye on the kids throughout the evening, but they have a great night watching, you know, various movies that are out in the theaters at the time. And those are the kind of programs that I would like to bring here to build inclusivity with the residents. And also I note that you have a few older adult communities here within the community. I would like to see some programs in there as far as maybe a AAA safe driving or some type of older adult driving programs, identity theft, fraud, some type of those programs. That we have partnerships throughout the local and federal government that come in and do these programs for us. It's not everything that we would have to do as the Saline Police Department, but we would be leveraging those relationships to bring programs to make inclusivity as important as it is and bring everyone together.
Thank you. I have no other questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mitchell. Councilwoman McClellan.
Hi, welcome. Mine is a little bit related to Councilmember Mitchell's, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So how do you foresee being involved in the community on a day-to-day basis? making sure the face of the police department is presented to the community. I feel like you answered some of those questions maybe already, but if
Yeah.
you could elaborate a little more on
Well,
that.
I tend to be fully immersed, and it all starts with the employees here at the Saline Police Department. We all want to be treated fairly. We want to feel that we're given the same opportunities of others. So it starts here at the police department in building up and supporting and getting that family feel here at the police department. But also getting out in the community in a uniform. I've been coming out to Benny's the last couple weeks, doing a little bit of homework. I've met a lot of your great residents there. I've walked over to the barber shop, although I don't need a barber. I met, I believe his name's Marty, at the barber shop. I've had dinner at Mac's and been over at Dan's for his burgers. So building those relationships has already started, but getting involved, I visited your chamber yesterday. There is a very big parade coming up here in December. About 1,500 residents, as I understand it, will be participating in it. So those are the things that I think there could be a concern coming from a larger department. Let me just explain that my philosophy when I was in college was I met my wife in high school. We got married after I was about a year on the job. And it was to always live in the community where I was a police officer. And I told my dad, whoever gave me a job first, I would stay there throughout my career. So that is why I am in Novi. I've been a very high-performing employee there for 26 plus years. But this, I don't know how to explain it. It speaks to my heart. My wife and kids, have sent me house listings, in the community. I've been to an open house here this past Saturday. So getting involved as much as I can in the community, being a member of Chamber, the Rotary Club, just being out there and being visible and being that connection to the police department. But I truly believe that starts with great employees as well and how they feel at work, because they're out spreading the word that the chief is a fair individual, and that just helps bring everyone together and feel comfortable getting involved.
Thank you. And can you tell us what you think your greatest strength as a leader is?
Wow.
I know it's really hard.
Well, certainly, let me just say this. I think the baseline is integrity for a police officer. And there are times when police officers let us down and they have to be held accountable. I have a high degree of integrity, but really what I want to tell you all about, and I just shared a little bit of, is my loyalty. I am not looking for the next greatest thing in 2 or 4 or 6 years. This is where I would plan to be a minimum of 15 years. I come from an automotive family. My brother was here earlier. He worked at Ford for 38 years. Our dad worked at Ford for 38 years. Our grandfather worked at Ford for 38 years. My uncle worked at Ford for 38 years. I figure I have at least 12 left in me, but I'm still having fun, and I have a passion for law enforcement. And I hope that that's coming through to you folks, because these are tough times for law enforcement. A lot of people get, in my profession, get beat down about public sentiment and that. I go to church, people still love the police. I think it's where you get your news and what you're believing. And for me, it's my passion.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilmember Gearbock.
Evening, Jerrod. It's good to meet you again.
Good to meet you,
And
sir.
have this chance, have this opportunity. My question, officer conduct is increasingly being scrutinized by the public to whom you serve. Please describe both your approach and experience in addressing conduct unbecoming of an officer, including insubordination, sexual harassment, or hostile work environment.
We have a very clear policy against all of those things that you just mentioned, the discrimination, harassment, and whatever. It starts at the top. The employees need to know that I'm fully engaged and immersed, and I'm holding myself accountable, and I'm improving myself throughout the organization. When there will be there has to be a clear policy in place as far as misconduct. So you go to the policy. This was kind of one of the things I learned at the school. No matter how many kids you had get in a fight or get caught with a marijuana cigarette, you always went to the rule book. So you go back to the rule book, make sure that you have clear and concise policies and procedures, and then you investigate thoroughly. The worst thing you can do for an organization is to ignore it, because you have employees that are doing the work, watching other people do the work, or wondering what's going on. And you have to have employees that are there engaged in the work, they have to know the rules, and when they break them, they have to be held accountable because the other employees are all watching, and they know that they would be held to the same standard as well. So to me, it helps the camaraderie, and it helps with the organization of the police department when you use accountability. A thorough and complete investigation is something that has to be done in a situation on any of those circumstances that you had mentioned. Now, is it times where we have to defer to a county sheriff's department if it's something that's egregious and it's something that the public trust may be shaken? If the Saline Police Department is investigating, a shooting involved by another member of the Saline Police Department, there's policies and procedures and contacts that are in place to reach out to the state police or the county sheriffs or some other organization that can come in and sufficiently investigate those matters. So for me, don't look to me to make anything go away for anyone. I hold myself very accountable, and I hold others accountable. Sadly, throughout my career, I've had situations where people I've gone to college with, hired on the job with, that I've had to recommend, suspensions for. And predominantly mistakes of the heart, not of the mind.
Okay.
But it's very important that everyone is treated fairly and consistently in any organization.
Thank you. My next question, there is a general understanding officers are granted some discretion when in the field. How do you monitor, evaluate, and address behavior is equitable and consistent?
First and foremost, I would look to my supervisors. There's this command structure. Here's the chief and 3 sergeants. I met one of your sergeants yesterday on a tour, Sergeant Hartwig. So they would be reviewing police reports, looking at tickets. I know they had a couple times where he had to get on the radio and answer some questions for some supervisors. So I would be looking to the sergeants that first, and truly they are the most important person in the organization because they're the ones that delivering the message from the chief, the executive staff to the officers, and they're the ones that's that first step of accountability. So if my sergeant were to come to me or anyone else and share that there might be an issue with discretion and the way it was applied, then that would be something that I would look into as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mayor Pro Tem Hart.
Yes, thank you. Good evening.
Good to see you again.
So I have just one question, since I've had a chance to speak with Mr. Hart previously. So this is my question. As the newly appointed Chief of Police in Saline, what are some techniques and methods you would employ to create an atmosphere of trust and unity within the organization, within the police department? And how might you, sort of on the flip side of that, address some disruption issues that might precede your arrival?
I believe negativity is a state of mind, first and foremost. So if I can address the second part of the question. I feel we have a choice. A lot of times people are hurt and hold grudges for things that have happened years and years and years ago. And if you were to listen to them tell you the story, you would probably think that it happened yesterday. And when you ask when it happened, it was 10, 15 years ago. So we need to address those issues. We need to work with that employee to get them to change their state of mind through positive reinforcement, through talking through the problems. So that's generally my philosophy, as I've found when I have, they're everywhere, right? These problems are in every organization. So to sit down and have a discussion with them to find out what is the root cause of an issue, what is your real rub here at the organization, and how can we get you past it? So that's the first part. How am I going to build a sense of camaraderie and family here at the Saline Police Department? I will be here hours early on my first day. I will be in uniform, and I will meet with the midnight staff as they're coming off. I'm going to introduce myself, share a little bit of my background, and I'm going to tell them how proud I am to be serving the citizens of Saline alongside of them. Not being their boss, but serving alongside of them. And then I'm going to tell them in the coming weeks, we're going to sit down and we're going to have a discussion, and I want you to answer 4 questions. What do we do really good? What do we do badly? What should we start doing? And what should we stop doing? And that's not giving the power of the chief's office away. It's getting inclusivity, to go back to your question, the first question, is getting them engaged at work. What we find is that improvement in the organization generally starts at that line level. We've had clerks before that said, why do we have a call tree? Why do we have a recorded voice? We want to answer the phone. We want somebody to hear that human voice and have that contact. So those suggestions come from those staff members. Does that mean that I will incorporate all of them or stop or start doing something? But at the end of meeting with all staff members, I will continue to do that throughout my first day, sworn and civilian staff. I met a lot of them over the last couple weeks. I want to get their input on those 4 questions. And that is the start of building trust and legitimacy with your staff members here. Every good leader should come in an organization and do that, and sit down and have those discussions with their staff members. And then share my contact information with them and let them know. If there's anything that interferes with your work or personal life, or you need to talk about anything, I need you to contact me. I want to talk about it, I want to know about it right away. I don't want to learn about it, as problems pop up on the job. So I want to get their input, I want to find out what they feel we should do with those 4 questions. And that will be the start of building that process. It's not immediate. It's not like I can walk in the door and everything is wonderful and rosy. There's kind of that honeymoon phase, so to speak, but it is something that I will work very hard at. And something that I tell my sergeants all the time, leadership is not easy. It's probably one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have if you're doing it right. It's something that you have to work at all the time, and you make one mistake, and now they're taking some money out of that trust bank because you've made a mistake, and you have to build that trust up again with them. So that is my philosophy on coming in here and building up this police department.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hart. Councilwoman Dillon.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
My first question is, what is your reaction when confronted by the statement, "This is the way we've always done it"?
Yeah, that's probably, besides we can't do it, that's probably one of the statements that bother me the most. We have to have a fresh look at how things are done. That's how we improve. And if I'm improving as an individual, the organization's improving, those around me. So when I hear that we've always done that, it's almost, to me, that signifies laziness. It feels a lack of wanting to look at vision and understand, are there better ways of doing things? So the first word that comes to my mind is laziness, and I don't accept that. I just don't. I'm a very determined person. I have a lot of grit and determination, and I wouldn't let that stop me at all. In fact, it would probably raise a few of my cop senses that I might be hitting on a very important subject at that point.
Thank you. My next question is, a significant portion of the current police department are seasoned officers with retirement eligibility within the near term. What would be your plan of action to ensure an ongoing, viable, experienced, and robust police force?
Recruiting right now is probably one of the largest problems that we have in law enforcement right now. Looking at your organizational chart, I made the assumption that they were more seasoned officers, and on my tour yesterday that was kind of verified. So I am always recruiting. When I'm at Lifetime Fitness, my trainer up there, when I talk to him, I'm like, hey, you have a bachelor's degree, you have a great temperament for law enforcement, you would be a great police officer. So I'm always looking for great police officers. You have an Explorer/Cadet program here. That might be a way where we can kind of get our young adults, get that relationship going with them and start mentoring them, get them into the field of law enforcement. And it's my understanding in the next 3 to 5 years, maybe about 70% of the department could turn over. So we have to start looking at a 3 to 5 year plan on how we're going to bring police officers in. But that's every day. That's if you're at Benny's or you're at the barbershop or wherever, and you know there's a great kid, and male or female, and they have a passion for law enforcement, and you feel they would be a good fit for the community. That's when you start having those conversations. But I would say your cadet and Explorer programs would be a great place to draw from a pool of applicants. But getting out to the job fairs, we should be going to several job fairs as this time starts getting closer and closer, and that would be my plan.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Seal?
Good evening again, Mr. Hart.
Good to see you, sir.
It's good to see you as well. Okay, from what you know of the Saline Police Department at this point, and you've obviously been kind of going around the community, taking a look at a number of different things, what improvement would you contemplate trying to implement in the near future if you became chief?
I think what we would really have to focus on is leadership at all levels. What I see are a lot of utility players here. I've had the benefit of having a juvenile detective, a property room officer, where I'm currently at right now. So everyone here plays a different role. They wear many, many hats. And to go back to Ms. Dillon's question, that's the kind of person that you would be looking for when you're doing those recruiting efforts. There are some police officers that want to go out, they want the adrenaline of running call to call every night in a big city and seeing, you know, what life has to offer in those areas. We would be looking for that small town police officer here that has a great sense of community-oriented policing. That is really what I'd be looking at to develop that leadership at all levels, get them some specialty training. I think there's, in just having some conversations yesterday on how certain things are happening as far as, I think there's a gentleman at the DPW that's talking about maybe building some cars here, outfitting some vehicles. So I would be looking to get some specialty training in that. But everyone I've talked to here so far has been very knowledgeable in a lot of different areas.
Good. All right. Next question is kind of a two-part deal, so listen to the first part and then form your answer to the second part. Are you familiar with the technology in use in the Department for Radio Communications, 911 phone service, report writing and storage, fingerprinting, and the photographing of prisoners? Please describe your understanding of these systems and how you feel about the present structure if you're familiar with it.
What I do know about the department here is that it has a Clemis RMS system here, and I see it's being used for dispatch. So being very familiar with that throughout my career, I've used Clemis. One thing I didn't see was a video conferencing tool for video arraignments. It's my understanding that no longer prisoners are not lodged here. The prisoners, if they're going to be held for long-term or detox, are taken up to Washtenaw County. So I would like to look at, we have 2 cells here. They look like they're in very great shape along with the police department. So I would be looking at potentially bringing that back, getting the lockup up to speed, whatever that may be, so you can use the booking photos. That's an important tool for investigations. That's how the more pictures and fingerprints and those types of identifiers that we could put into that Clemis system, that's more for us to draw for lineups and doing double-blind lineups. It's very, very important right now for consistency throughout the state of Michigan. So I would be looking to increase that. The radio system, 800 megahertz, I believe within the next 3 to 5 years, Clemis is preparing to change over those radio systems. I don't know where they stand in that process right now, but I know that the next generation of those is coming. We just did our upgrade to the next generation 911 at our department, and that was quite a few weeks of kind of sleepless nights, just kind of working your way through that. That's a very important piece of equipment and way for our public to reach out for emergency services. So if that's not running up to par, it's something that's very concerning. So,
Do you think there's a benefit in the integration of a number of different departments, like under the Clemis system for RMS or under the radio communication system with MPSCS?
do I feel that it's beneficial to do that?
Correct.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. Criminals don't know boundaries, right? They don't know what your city limits are in Saline. They don't know what they are in Novi or Ann Arbor or where have you. So they're operating regionally, 30 to 50 miles from their home. So they're going out in various communities. They don't generally know unless they happen to look at a sign, "Welcome to Saline," where they're at. So when we can start piecing together and looking at mug shots and dumping information into the system and then pulling it out, as long as it's not garbage in, garbage out, it's good intel. That's a way to start solving crime and working with other departments. So I feel that there is a benefit to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Mr. Hart, I actually changed my mind. I do have 2 questions for you. But I'll preface, they're a big, fat, slow pitch over home plate, so you should be able to handle them. I think it's important, though, to get them on the public record. As you know, one of the primary responsibilities of the chief of police here in Saline, on occasion, is assisting the city manager and legal counsel with collective bargaining. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience is?
Yes. In the department where I'm currently at, the Director of Public Safety generally sits in on the majority of the collective bargaining agreement, the negotiations with the various bargaining units, and I believe we have 4 currently at the department. There have been many times where the director has not been able to make meetings where I've sat in on the negotiation process to establish the next collective bargaining agreement. And what I've always really facilitated throughout my career, I remember as a young police officer, this was my first union job. So I remember the union president at briefing kind of walking by and throwing a piece of paper in front of me and saying, "Go ahead and list your demands down on this piece of paper." I'm like, demands for what? I've been here like a minute. You know, what exactly am I demanding here? So we're up for contract negotiations. So we want to give the city a list of our demands. And I thought right off the bat that sounded very strange to me. We're going into this negotiation process, making these demands. The term bothered me, still bothers me. So what I've done throughout my career is to basically facilitate each side on what their important issues are, that there's a bigger understanding here. The contract just isn't for Jerrod Hart. That the city council, the human resources director, they have to look at the health of the city. They have to understand what's going on in other departments, and you just can't walk in and demand a 5% raise. So my philosophy on all that has always been to be reasonable, to be willing to be flexible, and come to a mutual agreement without ending up in an arbitration. But that's kind of been my experience with that. And of course, anytime there's an issue, you always refer back to, let's say, a discipline issue or what have you. We did have to lay 3 police officers off in 2008, and it was, or I'm sorry, in 2010, and it was pretty tough. Our last one was 8.5 months pregnant. But everything that your collective bargaining really addresses all of those issues. I never thought we would ever have to lean on a layoff provision of the CBA, but it's very important to refer back to the CBA whenever there's circumstances that warrant it.
Very good. A 3-part question for you. And this was indirectly asked by, I believe, Commander Radzik at your first face-to-face interview. You are familiar with the concepts of situational leadership?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that that's important in police services?
I think it's the most important type of leadership. You can't have one style of leadership for all circumstances. It has to be situational. But we had a 48-inch water main break a couple weeks ago. I happened to be at the Chiefs Conference in Philadelphia, was preparing to come home, and all of this. We kind of ramped up our emergency operations center. It would not be a good time for me when I got home and I'm in the emergency operations center to say, gee, Detective Sergeant, can you go over, take some detectives and unload the Pepsi truck, you know, that has 300 cases of water on it. That's a time where you give clear and concise direction. Detective Sergeant, I need you to grab some detectives, go over to the Civic Center, unload that truck, and then come back and see me. Now, there are times where you seek input, that we bounce ideas off of each other on critical situations. Had an 84-year-old woman that was stabbed and suffocated a couple years ago in her home. And those are times where your leadership is collaborative. That's where you sit down and talk about what's the most important way. Are we following the Constitution, search and seizures, best practices? When are we giving constitutional rights to our suspect? So kind of both ends of the spectrum there, but you can't have one leadership style for all circumstances.
Actually, you answered the 3rd component of that as well, which is what would the practical application of that be if you were to receive if you were to be hired as the next chief of the Saline Police Department? So
Thank you.
I think you covered it very well. Mr. Hart, before we open it up for a second round of questions, do you have any questions or comments for us at this time?
I do not. I just appreciate everyone's time and the folks that are here, the residents that are interested in the process. I think that in the many times that I've been here, that's really part of, I don't think it's the city of Saline, I think it's the community of Saline. It's a great place. So I'm excited to earn the right to be here.
Very good. Well, you're indeed correct. It is a very close-knit community with a lot of cohesion, and we pride ourselves on that. So thank you for those comments. Let me start at the opposite end of the dais again. Ms. Mitchell, do you have any follow-up questions?
Just one, Your Honor,
Please.
please. Thank you, Mr. Hart. I was listening closely to your answers to Mr. CEO's questions about technology, and I was struck by your description of the regional behavior of criminals. And when you look at our community, do you see a need for resources to look at criminal issues? Do you see opioid use? Do you see community building? What are some priorities for you that, after you've had a chance to get to know us, what would be some priorities you would name?
Certainly, the opioid crisis is unbelievable right now. It's I've shared with a couple of council members during my time as a school resource officer. I made some connections, even back in 2000, 2004. Some kids that had been fighting those addictions back then, and one of them just fatally overdosed last year. So it's heartbreaking to see that. There are many, many partnerships. First of all, we are not going to arrest our way out of this problem. I hope that is not the first time you've heard that. There is no way that we are going to arrest our way out of this opioid problem. It's going to be done through education, support, the use of Narcan. Sometimes is a little bit controversial in communities. It's the reversal agent. There is a map that for no cost to the department or the city. It's called an OD map. It's available to law enforcement agencies that came out of the Baltimore, Washington, HIDTA, high-intensity drug trafficking area. We regionally belong to the Detroit HIDTA. And what it does is you sign up, and at the scene of each overdose, and whether Narcan was used or not, or naloxone was used or not, you track these. So it's a tracking mechanism. So you could start seeing if you have patterns. That's something that we should all be using. I think we're one of maybe 5 agencies right now that are using it, and I don't know why. Because it's a way for us to kind of predict and look at where our resources are going and try to make interventions. Is there something going on with a dealer in that particular area? Are they going to the same dealer? But the fentanyl and carfentanil that's being cut into the heroin is where the majority of the problems are. There needs to be community discussions. I know there's one next Thursday, I believe, at the Ann Arbor Library that I hope that folks would come to. We've had 3 panels. We've tried it at our middle school, our police department, and the library. And this is where determination comes in. The first one we maybe had 10 or 15 people because folks don't want to talk about it. The second one, we had a few more. Just last Monday, I sat on a panel along with colleagues from the DEA, the FBI, the HIDTA out of Detroit, our local hospital and treatment facility at Brighton Hospital, to give parents and their students. I was very pleased to see a lot of parents brought their students with them to our library to have this open discussion about this opioid epidemic. So that is something that continually needs to be brought forth. There are trends right now that currently the age group of 40 to 59 in females is all of a sudden seeing about a 40% spike in overdoses with opioids. That's information that has to be shared. There are no secrets. One of the questions that I used to get when I started the school resource officer program, have you found the drugs yet? And I would say, what drugs? Well, the drugs in the high school, the kids are all on drugs. And I'd say, yeah, I've not come across that vending machine, but let me put this to you. The kids are here for how many hours a day? And when they're not here, where are they? They're in our communities. They're in our homes. They work. So don't point fingers that it's a school problem This is a community problem. This affects all of us. My daughter that was here tonight, best friend, a couple years ago, had surgery, couldn't overcome it, and we lost her. So this is something that's affecting everyone. It is scary. It's very scary. Police officers have to have protective gear on when they're touching suspected heroin, because even as technicians are pulling out phones to process them at a later date from an overdose scene, we've had technicians fall down and had to be used, Narcan had to be used on them to reverse the overdose. That's how powerful this fentanyl and carfentanil is. So that would be certainly a priority of mine. And I think that by building relationships with the community, people will feel more comfortable at coming out and having these discussions. I would love, and one of the first things I would schedule is a coffee with a cop and chat with the chief. You know, at the police department, we would sit down and have that conversation as a community. Invite our partners from the DEA. It's very important that we all work together on this problem and educate each other. When I have a staff member over the summer that fell off a horse, and I know he was given some some incredibly powerful medicine for the pain, I'm having that discussion with him. We all have a responsibility, whether you're a police chief or a council member or you're in the audience here, we have a responsibility to look out for each other. We truly do. And to have those tough discussions with your family members, your friends, or your husband's or wife's friends, or whoever it is, because this is very powerful and it's really a problem in our region.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Mitchell, or McClellan, excuse me, anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. Thank
Very
you, though.
good. Councilmember McClellan?
Yeah, I just have one question.
Please.
What is your approach to diffuse a tense situation, be it an officer, a citizen, or a locally elected official?
Well, first and foremost is to not raise your voice to their level. When people are upset, they tend to come in, they're screaming, they're yelling. I just had one of these in the lobby of our police department a couple weeks ago. A woman was very upset about her vehicle being towed and didn't understand it. So when I finally just came in non-defensively and started to have a discussion with her to get her side of the story and then to share why the police officer did what they did. They didn't do anything wrong, but the circumstances were, she felt that her vehicle had been towed improperly and she felt there was an injustice there. But to sit down and walk her around and then all of a sudden kind of see that light bulb go off and she puts a smile on her face and explain, she now understands why we did what we did. So it really goes back to communication and taking your time to explain things to others. And whether it's a police officer, 26 years you can't be a cop and not have a disagreement with a fellow police officer. So that just boils down to communication and perception and trying to explain both sides, get both sides of the issue out and have a resolution.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, anything further?
Yes, thank you.
Please.
Would you talk a little bit about how you would foresee building relationships with other city departments outside the police department and with the mayor and city council members? And feel free to reference, but not exclusively, issues of chain of command.
Well, I think just being warm and accessible and friendly and building those relationships, reaching out to area chiefs. I plan on reaching out to the court administrator here in town. If successful here, I believe your legal counsel tonight was here, one of the gentlemen that was in the audience. I had discussions with him. But just going out and starting to build the trust and relationship with them by, whether it's a coffee at Benny's or a burger over at Dan's, wherever it may be, but taking the time. I feel right now, society really is under attack by information. And one of the things I love about your community is that people are taking the time to pay appropriate attention to each other. When I'm here, I don't see people sitting across from each other in a coffee shop on their phones. And I see them engaging each other in conversation. And I feel that that's very important, that we have so much information being thrown at us all the time. We're all looking and liking stuff on Facebook and Twitter and all the other things. But paying the proper attention to the people that are sitting across from me is the way that I would build those relationships. And chain of command is exactly that. The police department's a paramilitary organization. There's an open door policy in the chief's office, but you need to address these things with your sergeant. I've had that happen before as a lieutenant. I feel that I'm a very warm, affable person. Sometimes people think, oh, geez, he doesn't hold people or himself accountable. Contrary to popular belief, I do. So they feel comfortable kind of coming in and having those conversations, and I've steered them right back to their sergeant. I understand your concern, but the first level is with your sergeant. Address that with him or her, and then we can have a discussion later.
Could I follow up?
Absolutely.
So could you elaborate on that chain of command concept a little bit more? For example, with relationship to city council members, the city manager, and the police chief?
Well, I think that we all work for the citizens, right? So we're all on the same team. Having any type of conversations with council, if I happen to see somebody, throughout the community and they start asking me questions, my policy has always been that I would let the city manager know about that conversation. That is just the way that I've operated throughout my whole career. My director of public safety is not always at work. When he's gone, I'm in charge, the police and fire department. So I get a lot of questions that are thrown at me. Our mayor right now is a retired sergeant from our police department. We have a great relationship. But if the mayor and I have a conversation and he's asking things about the operation of the city, then I have an obligation to let my boss know about that. So I hope that doesn't offend you, but that's just the way that I do business.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hart. Councilwoman Dillon, any additional questions?
Well, chain of command was actually my next one, so I will sort of segue off of that and ask how you time manage between the administrative side of your duty and the community policing aspect side.
Yeah. Generally about 2 hours a day I try to dedicate to the administrative side. We've just completed an incredible 32-month journey on accreditation, which required a lot of administrative time, reviewing policies, distributing policies to staff members. It was a very transparent effort, but there's a lot of administrative duties. What I find is when I'm bogged down with administrative duties, my management by walking around, my attention to employees tends to suffer. So what I do is I get out of bed earlier, I do my reading in the morning, I read our summaries and other things, the local newspaper, online, and I go to work about an hour and a half early. And then I have those conversations with staff members, because a lot of them work different shifts than I do, that I wouldn't be able to have throughout the day because I have administrative duties on. And those relationships are very important to me.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Seal?
Two questions to kind of follow up. You say you just went through an accreditation process. Did you do the CALIA process or the state process?
Sir, we did the CALIA process. We had started that in July of 2014 before the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police started their accreditation program. We are actually now going through the MLEAC, the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police one. But that was an interesting process. It was laborious. You know, as a former police officer, you know, police officers really kind of dislike two things: the way things are and change. So it was quite a journey to convince 69 sworn members and about another 30, to jump into this process. But it was all about communication, and I feel that any type of accreditation process really increases the transparency of the police department to the citizens in multiple ways. I thought our policies were, and they were really good when we started the program, but now, they're phenomenal right now.
Okay. Second question is, and certainly not to sandbag you because there are members of the media present in the audience, what do you feel the responsibility of the chief of police is to the media?
Well, we've always had an open relationship with the media. We've shared what we can share. There's certainly things that you can't until, let's say, a suspect is arraigned. You don't want to certainly share things that would compromise an investigation, but having an amicable relationship with the media has been beneficial for us, for me. I tend to handle the majority of that in my current position right now. In fact, I think when I came in yesterday for a tour, there might have been a dispatcher watching one of my recent videos, so I didn't know that stuff was still out there.
I see. Thank you.
And actually, Mr. Hart, Councilwoman McClellan actually has an additional question.
Yeah,
for
just
you.
one that came up, my colleagues were talking. Are you familiar with the Lexipol system? And, would you plan to continue to use it?
I would like to evaluate it. We use a slightly different system called Power DMS. They're both very similar. Lexipol, Gordon Graham, the founder of that, a very, very intelligent man. I would recommend that all of you, at some point in your public service career, go to a seminar put on by Gordon. He's a risk manager, an attorney, former CHP, had the opportunity to have lunch with him a couple years ago. We brought him out to my church and had him put on a presentation, I think about 2 years ago. His program is generally, the Lexipol program, as I understand it, is more legally defensible, and there are attorneys that are reviewing these policies and procedures for the police department, and then they're constantly comparing them to case law as new decisions come out of the Supreme Court, whether it be the U.S. or the Michigan or the Court of Appeals, whatever. So it's a very sound program. It's just different than what I'm used to. But it's a great management tool for ensuring that your policies are up to date.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart, we want to be respectful of your time, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to share with us anything else that you believe is pertinent before we wrap up.
I just want to say that I don't know what it is about this position or this opportunity. My goal was within the next year to find my next home for 10 to 15 years minimum. My family, almost immediately upon applying for this position, started sending me, house listings. I had to go, I went on a couple of open houses over the weekend. I don't know what it is about this position or your community other than I love the feel of everyone seems to have a sense of, I kind of define it as a progressive community, very protective of and proud of its downtown and its history, its rich history here. The mixture of established homes and newer homes, the main thoroughfare going through town. This job, I have felt, is probably one of the best opportunities that I've had, short of marrying my beautiful wife 25 years ago. So I would be honored to come in here and work with you and establish a very excellent police department and make many connections here. My goal would be within 6 months, you'd feel like I grew up here because I'm just everywhere. So I appreciate this opportunity to interview in front of all of you, and I'm respectful of your time as well and appreciate you all coming out tonight.
Very good. Are there any final thoughts or questions for Mr. Hart before we dismiss him this evening? Why don't you come up and shake our hands, but it was delightful to visit with you, and we enjoyed hearing your answers to the numerous questions we asked.
Thank you again.
It's a pleasure. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, my friend. Yep.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Safe trip back to Novi.
I think I'm going to Dan's, everyone.
Okay.
That's one of my concerns if I get hired. I have a few extra pounds. We're back.
Any council members need to use the restroom now? Would be a good time.
I need to ask some water.
Yeah, especially the one down there. 'Cause
I noticed that.
yes, as I would have done.
Well done. That's kind of.
And again, I would remind the folks in the audience to please feel free to fill out a comment card that's on the back table. Once it's completed, it can be placed in the basket.
Great.
Very good. Very impressive. Very impressive, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Restroom.
You know what, Mary, I'm so sorry. Can I get back to you just a minute? I just have a question. Just a minute, please.
These what I call open skies. The rest of us, open skies. So if you have copies, and state Michigan,
Those are nice diversity of questions, too.
Yeah, I liked your question there. It's understandable.
I thought everyone's questions were good, and I thought you asked, people asked questions of topics that they were particularly passionate about, which I thought was good. Say what?
No, not. I said Lifetime Fitness. Now, if you'd said Big Tanny, you would have had a date.
Where is their Lifetime Fitness?
It's in Canton.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Gosh, I haven't heard that word in that name in a long time.
So yeah, we're gonna have to plan that first visit pretty strategically, because if you take them to some places, they ain't coming back. Yep. Friends, we're going to go ahead and get started with the second interview. If you'd like to take your seats. Mr. Lewis, welcome. Let's take a seat.
Thanks, sir.
Chief, this is how we're going to proceed. We have some prepared questions. We're going to start to my left with Councilwoman Mitchell. Each council member will begin by asking 2 questions. If there is an item they want to follow up on or a deficiency in your answer, they're permitted to ask an additional question or 2. Once everybody has an opportunity to ask questions, I will probably ask a few as well. Then we'll open it up for comments from you, and then probably do a second round of questions, if that sounds amenable, if you're amenable to that.
Sounds good.
Excellent, okay. Very good. Well, we will start then at the end with my council colleague, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much, Chief Lewis, for being here.
Thank you.
And I mentioned before, and I'll mention again, that these questions aren't in any particular order. You know, we all have our different areas, so there's no meaning or rhyme behind the order of questions. And I guess I just want to start with the topic of inclusivity and talk about what that would mean to you in your role.
Okay, that's a good question. And in this role here, and actually during my tenure as the chief, in being inclusive means a lot of different things to me. It could mean in my department how I interact with my employees, how we include, how we do things inside the agency. One of the things I participate in is the Diversity Inclusion Committee, which is a committee out of our Rotary up in Muskegon, that we work very hard and diligently in our community for inclusion, to include all. And it's very special to me, very important to me as the chief of police in a community of about 40,000 people, and the diversity that we have forward, because a lot of individuals and groups feel not inclusive or not included. And so working with the Rotary Division and our subcommittee, which is diversity inclusion, in a greater community, we're working towards this, and it's really brought our community together. And basically that philosophy, that methodology, when I take that back into my departments, whether it be fire, inspections, or police, and we worry, and we work on that inclusiveness, it helps more fluid organization. We're able to go out, people have just a better working attitude, relationship, and we go in the community, they're fostering the same feeling of being inclusive, included,
and therefore, we're just all better off as, a city municipality, and how we interact with our community, and even our community. And like I said, I work on both sides of that with civic organizations and inside our organization.
And along that same subject, and you've had a chance to get to know us a little bit and look at our situation in our community a little bit, what ways could you suggest, specific to Saline, could you help that cause of inclusivity?
Well, once, I know Saline in two different, I guess, dynamics is when I grew up, what Saline was then and what Saline is today. And there's been a lot of cultural changes and so on and so forth. The city, although seems small, it's a worldly community. It's by Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, universities, colleges, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different people that basically live in and visit Washtenaw County. Saline is very pivotal in that. I think because, I have always worked towards that inclusivity and just, I understand it. And like I said, through civic organizations and in the police department, I want to make sure our police department is up for that task. Because as we interact with people on a daily basis, whether it's day, afternoon, or nights, our officers and officers around the state are seen in a certain, they have certain perceptions and images. And it's not always a positive type, image. And so when myself and my department and my officers and my employees work towards inclusiveness and diversity and understanding, what happens is we become a more effective service in our community. And so our job is always difficult at best because a police department generally is not delivering the best news as we pull you over for some kind of minor traffic violation. That is very upsetting, and especially to a group or a class of people that don't understand your service. So I spend a lot of time so people understand our service. They feel included in our process. As we've developed our policies, our procedures, our community policing program, things like that, we get input from citizens. And that, more than that, is you have to show them the outcome. You have to show them the final product. And when they see they've been included, or they see that the department is evolving and coming forward, and that doesn't just go for the police department, that goes for the entire municipal service. When they see that evolution, that government or a local government is meeting their needs and changing and morphing to meet the needs of that community, and we are better off, the community's better off. But more importantly, the police is more effective because, like I said, we have a lot of difficult duties, and depends on what we do is how difficult or easy it's going to be in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mitchell. Councilwoman McClellan.
Hi, welcome. My question is, how do you foresee being involved in the community on a day-to-day basis, making sure the face of the police department is presented to the community? How would you do that, and how would you foresee doing that?
Well, basically, this is a well-established police department, and I already have, I guess, I have a perception, or I have an image of the Saline Police Department. And I've seen the police department for many decades, and I've seen it evolve into what it is today. And so what I would like to do is, as I, basically observe and I review and I evaluate what we are, I know what my perception is. I would continue to gather information from our community members as to what they expect of us or what they see. So I would go out and obviously do community engagement. That's one of my biggest things I do in the city of Muskegon. I'm very involved in the community policing effort, and we have probably one of the most effective, grandiose community policing efforts I have ever seen that I've been around, and I've been at multiple police departments, and how we do it and how it impacts. And with these tools in the community and asking We do like surveys, and we get feedback back. And because I do that and I'm out there, not only am I out there as an employee, I'm out there as the chief, I'm out there as the leader for the city, and I'm also out there as a citizen. Going out there and just being a regular citizen, but people know who you are, you're very effective in the community. And in the city of Muskegon, I live in the city. So when I'm out there shoveling my driveway in the snowstorm, maybe helping the neighbor or vice versa, which a lot of times they help me because I'm always so busy, that builds dynamic relationships, it's networking, it's all about that. And I'll tell you what, my work is never done. There's always another way to do it. I'm always striving for everything I can to continue that, to just get into the community and see how we're doing. And not always is it positive. And that's what makes this job tough. But it also makes it challenging because I just go back for more until we, the police department is seen a certain way, or how our dispatch service functions. It's a forever morphing and evolving process, and you're always tweaking it because the community is ever changing. And like I said, Saline is a dynamic, and it's becoming diverse, and it's changing. I've seen the changes, and I'm not sure how fast it's going, but when I come back and I see things, it looks like it's pretty rapid, but it's moving along.
Thank you. My second question, just a general, tell us your greatest strength as a leader. What do you think your greatest strength is?
Well, fortunately, I think my greatest strength is communication. And not only as the leader of an organization or being a chief, my early days as a patrol officer, I've just been a communicator. I enjoy people, I like people, and you always hear this term. I went into law enforcement because I wanted to help people, but I truly enjoyed working with people all these years. That's the only reason I'm still here, is I really enjoy it. And so communication has been the key, because we do a lot of training on different ways to handle situations, and we have these things called force continuum and levels of this and levels of that. But I have found out through the years, and doing my career in Ypsilanti, there again, that's a dynamic community. It was a high volume, calls for service community. We did not sit around, and we spent a lot of time engaging with the public. I'm telling you, on a minute, hourly, and daily and monthly basis, we were always engaged with the community. And probably my greatest strength there was that I was able to communicate, because we had so many different groups, so many different types of people in our city, from students to manufacturer workers, very wealthy people, people passing through, people from foreign nations. They were all in front of us. And I always found myself morphing myself or changing how I presented or how I communicated to them. And I was very successful because, as you can see around the United States, when officers, command officers, chiefs of police do not effectively communicate in their communities, generally you're on the front page or you're on one of the main news stations. And that means a lot to me, because Muskegon, as I've watched what's happened around the country, I spend each and every day communicating with my community. As we see critical events occur in towns we've never even heard of. Who's heard of Ferguson? Well, once I heard about it, we were not going to be the next one. And the only way to work on that is have straight lines of communication and have relationships built. And I'm telling you, be able to call people after 5 p.m. and before 7. And that has been my success. And how I communicate differently, how I have operated on certain situations where 10 or 15 years ago I handled it one way, now I handle it differently. And that form of communication has helped me, keep our community safe. It keeps it calm. It keeps it informed with transparency. All those are communication.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman McClellan. Councilman Gearbaugh.
And thanks again for you being here tonight to have our opportunity to speak with you. My question is, officer conduct, and you kind of touched on this already, is increasingly being scrutinized by the public to whom they serve. Please describe both your approach and experience in addressing conduct unbecoming of an officer, including insubordination, sexual harassment, or a hostile work environment.
Those three are pretty dynamic behavior problems. Before I answer the question, I want to say one thing. Through my tenure in law enforcement, the professionalism of the officer I see today is head and shoulders above what I've ever witnessed in the distant past. I'm pleasantly surprised by the abilities, skills, and knowledge of officers today. Their formal training, their higher education, our training academies. So they come to us, those things you just talked about, they do occur, but I'm not seeing that like we did years ago. But in my 2 police departments where I have been chief, and that is a proven thing where I have dealt with those situations, I do not tolerate those situations, and I approach it like this. Hopefully, we have done our job through those mechanisms that I just talked about, and then the way we communicate in our department, our policies, our procedures, our culture, my philosophy to the officers, my vision, my mission. So our officers, those men and women, do not venture into those areas. But when I was at Ypsilanti, I was in charge of internal affairs. At Milan, I took care of the internal affairs. And at Muskegon, although I have an internal affairs officer, I lead the way in officer behavior. And I spend my time coaching, I spend my time mentoring. We look at the officers where they're at. We try to head those things up. We're on a proactive approach. Because when that occurs, those 3 dynamic things you talked about, I'm going to have to react. And I'd prefer to be in the proactive mode and do things to avoid that. But we don't always have those successes. And my, I guess, 3 major departments, Ypsilanti, Milan, and Muskegon, where I was in top command positions, when I had to deal with those situations, I did. And there's been a few Muskegon officers that have fallen into that, those disciplinary arenas, and they were no longer police officers. Because in this day and age, you cannot tolerate insubordination. You cannot tolerate sexual harassment. You cannot tolerate these things. And in these scenarios, officers' careers were ended. And we have to be able to prepare for that and make sure that when we act in those arenas of discipline, that we're successful. And I'll finish it up like this. One of my officers, his career was ended, and he was awarded his job back. And the first thing I said to him when he came back is that nothing has changed here. I will help you down the path of our mission and vision, our policies and procedures, but nothing has changed here. Within 12 months, he was relieved of duty for the same thing. He's no longer with us anymore. So what I'm telling you is, not only do I follow up on it, the next time around, I'm going to follow up the same way until it comes to an end. And that's how I feel about those kind of situations.
Thank you. My next question. There's a general understanding that officers are granted some discretion in how they handle situations when they're in the field. How do you monitor, evaluate, and address behavior that it's equitable and consistent?
Okay, first of all, discretion is very important with a police officer. In this modern age, a lot of departments would like to basically really tighten it down on discretion. But I feel that officers are most effective when they are a credible officer with integrity and they can exercise discretion. Discretion can be monitored or watched through what the citizen input. We have a very strong citizen complaint program in Muskegon. The program is dynamic because, first of all, if you have an issue with our city service, and I keep referring to the police as a service because that's what it is, or any of our services in our city, you can complain to any department about any other department. So you're not required to come just to me or just to the police department. There's other mechanisms to do so, which makes it inviting to the citizen to give me input, because that's what I call a complaint, is input. And when that happens, where something occurs out there, where discretion is maybe not quite right, it's been over or under exercised, I'd like to hear about that, because we will start our internal process to look at that. We also have an anonymous way to bring in complaints. It's a little more difficult to sometimes take formal action, but it still alerts me that we have a problem, and I still then can act in my police department to take care of those issues. And it's been a very helpful tool. Some people have just complained to just me and want to remain anonymous, and I become their advocate, and I move the complaint forward and take action. That's been very successful. And we also have different types of technology that we use that have been very effective. We have about a fourth generation dash cam system in our vehicles. It's been absolutely pivotal in capturing things. And there again, through training, officers understanding, they too want to use that equipment to show their peers, their bosses, the administration, what they're doing. It's been a very effective tool as a behavior modifier and to see what's going on out there. So I use all these different mechanisms. And one more check and balance that we have that even puts a check and balance on me is we've created what they call a Citizens Police Review Board. So when I have gathered information like you're talking about and bring it forth, then I'm able to conclude or come up with a disposition on that complaint or that issue, and I forward it to a Citizen Review Board. They then review it and see how I've done and see if they concur with my decision or not. It's been very helpful for me because I put a lot into that because I want to make sure it's conducive or it's right to the situation, because there's a lot of transparency, a lot of oversight there. So that's how we do it. And the officers know what's in place. And going back to what I said a question or two ago, is the professionalism of my officers tends to amaze me sometimes as to where they're all at and how they behave. Hey, they make mistakes, but I'm always pleasantly surprised to see how well they understand the policy procedures, how well their training has come out, and how they interact with the community. And so, I'm always pleasantly surprised, generally.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gearbaugh. Mayor Pro Tem Hart.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Since I've had a chance to talk with you before, I have one question, not two, but it has two parts.
Oh, okay.
So, as the newly appointed police chief of Saline, what are some techniques that you would employ to create an atmosphere of trust and unity within the organization, that is, within the police department? And secondarily to that, how might you address some disruptive issues that may pre-exist your arrival in the department?
Well, first of all, for the trust and unity is, I like to participate with the employees. I'm fully capable with my past. I have a working past where anyone that looks at my background or my credentials can see that I have been in various positions and functioned there successfully. So generally, when people look at me, the trust is I have done things. I have been there. So when I meet the employees and we start interacting and building those relationships, they can look at the past, and of course the current or the present, and they will see what's in front of them. And then from there on out, they review you. They evaluate you. And it depends on what type of leader you are. And my leadership style changes. It can be situational, it can be transformational, transactional, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish, because those help guide me to get trust and integrity it helps me understand the concepts and the philosophies. So when I go to employees, they see a knowledge base there that they look up to, or at least can look over at and understand. And as I work through that stuff, I've always been able to gain the respect of those employees, and also working side by side with them on tough situations, or maybe even minor things, volunteering with them, participating in the community, being at a parade, stepping out there directing traffic. They kind of get a kick out of that, especially I'm not as good as they are, because I haven't been on the road in a while. So they appreciate that stuff, and you build that relationship. And that's the good news. That's what I strive for. That's the good news. And that's why I have enjoyed being the leader of organizations and the chief of police, because I've gotten those kind of results. But then you said, what happens when things don't quite go that way?
Right, disruptive issues that may predate your arrival in the department, for example.
That's not uncommon to me, because like I said, this isn't the first time I've taken over any organization that had trouble. Like I said, I went to Muskegon. I was pleasantly surprised there. It was unbelievable. But when I went to Milan, there was trials and tribulations like that, and it is challenging. That's where my experience comes in. My tenure at Ypsilanti, because we were a high volume department, there was disruption there. There was behavioral issues. There was things occurring there, and I guess that was my training platform. I watched how things went down. I learned how to problem solve. I learned the mechanisms that were in place to deal with these things. And when there was disruptive behavior or there was things going wrong, how we were going to deal with it. And early on in my career, I was part of union leadership. So I saw it from a different aspect. And even there, I tried, when there was disruptive behavior, and I could tell that an employee was maybe a little outside the white lines. Even though I was a union representative, I tried to pull them off the side and talk to them to help them get back where our department culture was, or acceptable behavior. Once again, in the command officers, I was the chief steward of our command officers. We had 16 sergeant and lieutenants, and they're not always immune from being disruptive or being disciplined or having issues. Same thing there. I worked from a counselor, a mentor stance. So I spent many years seeing that side of things. So when I became the chief of police, I didn't forget that. And a lot of times I have empathy towards people, why they're disruptive or why things are going wrong. And so I try to communicate with them. And it's sometimes as simple as this. Just to pull somebody in and go, can you tell me what's wrong? I mean, can you tell me what's up? And forget, the rank at the door, and try to be a little more humanistic. And you'd be surprised what people tell you when it's kind of like not so formalized. And I've solved a lot of issues like that. I can tell you some different scenarios how that's worked. Where sometimes I just went back to the basics and just found out what's wrong. And then when I find out what's wrong, I can fix it.
Thank you.
Or at least try.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Dillon.
Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
My first question, what is your reaction when confronted with the statement, "This is the way we've always done it"?
Boy, have I heard that a few times. I respect that. I mean, when someone says they've done it that way for a long time, they're telling me more than they've done it for a long time. They're probably telling me that they don't want to change, because they feel that's a good way to do it. Unfortunately, in our business, and we talked about this a minute ago, evolution is, first of all, we're going to have to find out, what they've been doing forever, and I assess why I'd like to change that, and then with their input, and then maybe the information at hand, why we need to maybe tweak this or change this. At some point, you can get buy-in, but there are even times when people go, no matter what you put from me, I just don't want to change. And at that point, being the chief or the leader, once you've done your due diligence and you've vetted the process and you've gone through this and you've kind of showed them the information, got the input, then we have to move forward. And at Milan especially, I made some pretty dynamic changes down there. One was we had a very small in-house report writing system. It was records information management system, very small, canned, very simple, easy to work with. A CAD, which is a computer-aided dispatch, and a report management system. It was very simple. I learned in a couple hours. The problem was, if you put junk in, you get junk out. So we embarked on putting CLMS in place, which is a management system that it's very popular in Washington County. I believe it's here in Saline. And that was kind of a paradigm shift. It was a real dynamic change for those officers. And it took time. And one by one, we got buy-in. And at one point, we actually thought we were going to have to scrap the whole program because we were a little stalemate because, hey, we've never done that before like that, or we're not going to do that. And in the end, we had implemented all what I call the modules of CLMS, really enjoyed it, really enhanced the police service, professionalized it, became like our neighbors, and after leaving there, it stayed. And so it just shows you that sometimes change is dynamic, change is difficult, but I think I have a path or a glide path to get us through those kind of attitudes like we've always done it this way before.
Thank you. My second question is, a significant portion of the current police department are seasoned officers with retirement eligibility within the near term. What would your plan of action be to ensure an ongoing, viable, experienced, and robust police force?
Well, one of the first things I have to do is, if that's the case, we need a succession plan. And generally, we will look at, what blocks of officers we have, and we'll have a timetable at that point, whether we're going to start promotional processes, whether we're going to start hiring, or what we're going to do, because there will be a day that these people leave. And one thing I've learned about smaller departments, City of Muskegon, I have 80 sworn officers. So if a couple walk out the door, it's not really a problem. I've got plenty of officers. But when I was in Milan, there were smaller departments, 1, 2, 3 retirements can be devastating. And so it's important to have a plan in place before it happens. I think I said a minute ago, I don't want to react. I like to start in the center, being proactive and work my way out, because those are things that you need to be ready for, or at least have a plan in place. So when this starts happening, and you lose this institutional knowledge, or this background significance, you have other people in place, or you have a plan what you can do to replace them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dillon. Councilmember Seal?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Jeff. It's good to see you again. Jeff, from what you already know about the Saline Police Department and what you may have learned in your recent inquiries about where we are today as compared to 6 years ago when you left the area, what improvements would you contemplate trying to implement here in the near future as the next chief of police?
It's difficult to say with that void of time because I have a very high image or perception of the Saline Police Department. But I also know that sometimes police departments can face adversity. And as I did my homework and I looked at the Saline Police Department, I wanted to look at it a lot of different ways. Besides for just a person in law enforcement, and this is another department I had dealt with, I wanted to look one step further. And as I looked into the history of the department, I noticed that there was an evaluation done in 2015. It gave me some insight into the department as to what was going on after I left. And it also gave me just a topical view of what was going on, and then some recommendations as to maybe how to enhance or refine or continue the fine work the Saline Police Department has been doing and maintaining that high image and that perception and that safety that the Saline Police had always as I was growing up, it always put out there, and their ability to be a full-service department. So as I looked at that stuff, I saw very quickly, if I came into this police department in the next month or so, I would like to see where we are today as to how I viewed them when I worked in Milan and I worked with Chief Button and Deputy Chief CO. I'd like to see, I saw the evaluation, the efficiency and effectiveness evaluation of 2015. And then I'd like to see, when I got here, as I always practice OREA, and it's kind of an acronym I came up with. It's just about observing, reviewing, implementing, assessing, those kind of things. And I'd bring that, I've used it multiple times, whether it was just a project I had, or when I looked at the police department, I would observe and look as to see where we are as we approach 2018. From what I knew back years ago, the time I was chief in Milan, from that evaluation, and then today. I got a couple things to look at. I think very quickly I could see where the department is at and start maybe recommending some changes, if need be. And I'm sure there's some there.
Thank you. So I'm going to phrase this question a little differently for you than I did for Mr. Hart, because obviously you know about the technology the department uses. You've already talked a little bit about Clemis and the introduction of the RMS system and the CAD system over there at Milan. But knowing what you do about the department radio communications, the 911 phone service, the report writing and storage, their fingerprinting system, and their photographing of prisoners, can you describe for me your understanding of these systems and if you feel they are or are not important in the operation of the police department?
Obviously, I think they're extremely important, and it's almost a joy. When I left Milan, we had gone to the 800 megahertz digital radio system, which I thought was just a nice radio system. From what we had before, it was quite an improvement, and I was very enthralled with it, and it was an absolute necessity for all police departments, especially the city of Milan. When I went to Muskegon, I was unpleasantly surprised by the fact we had VHF radios and still do today. And when you have a 80-person department and you have one channel, inoperability is very difficult. And I have seen the contrast. Now, I didn't ask for that, saw it firsthand. Like, I'm proud to say this week, because when I got there, what do you think I'm saying? We need 800 radios. This week, I sit on a committee called the Coordinating Committee. We had just sent a letter to our policy board, to the Muskegon County, Muskegon County, and all the departments would like to go to the 800, which is partly your question. I was more than overjoyed with that because I have struggled for 6 years with the VHF antiquated radio system. Next is our the CAD and the records management system you're talking about. I do have an advantage there because, like I told you a minute ago, I was very pivotal, a proponent from the beginning when Washington County entertained Clemis. I got Clemis to Milan. I brought every module they offered there, including we brought monthlies back. I was able to actually create reports that were dedicated to our community, our park checks. If I wanted to do lawn mowing reports, I could do that. Anything I wanted to pull from Clemis, I had it. I had the impound module, I had the crash module, the ticket module. We fingerprinted, I had the mug shot. And Milan went from having about, let's say, a couple thousand photographs to look at on our photo lineups. When we brought Clemis in, I think we had like 9 million at the time. It was just astounding. And talk about need. It advanced. We became a transformed, different police department just because of the system that we came on. Not to mention, I cut the budget about 50% to go to this grandiose system that we were implementing. So I really supported it, understood it. I understand it's still here today, which is fantastic. But let me tell you the retrospect of that, or kind of the dark side of that. When I went to Muskegon, I found out that we had a different system. And it was a private vendor system that you pay for. But we paid for Clemens also. But when I started realizing that modules were $40,000 or $50,000, pretty shocking. And so I run a department of 80 on a very limited system. So once again, talk about want versus need. Clemens is a very needed system. I'm very familiar with it, support it, and it'd be really nice to deal with that again.
Thank you.
Chief Lewis, I've got a couple questions for you. And they're easy ones. I just want to get this information on the record. Will you elaborate a little bit more regarding your collective bargaining experience? We've talked about this before, but one of the primary responsibilities of the chief is working with our city manager and legal counsel on collective bargaining. Can you speak to this council and to the public in terms of what your experience is and what skills and attributes you bring to the table?
Certainly. I'll just repeat it quickly, but I was the vice president for the Police Officers Association of Michigan when I was in Ypsilanti. I was also the chief steward for the Police Officers Labor Council and negotiated many, many contracts for patrol and for command at Ypsilanti. When I was in the city of Milan, obviously I was on the other side of the table then, and we had the Police Officers Labor Council for both the command and the police. But I had already made inroads in with those business agents. I understood both those unions, both those unions. And it was dynamically more easily for me to sit on either side of the table with that experience. So when I got to Milan, one thing I tried always working with when we did contracts was I liked putting incentives into the contract. Years ago, when I first started, it always seemed like it was a win-loss type thing with negotiations, which made us unhappy when we lost, happy when we won. But that doesn't create a good culture in your police department to have winners and losers, in your police department every day. So fortunately, we had a very an excellent chief at Ypsilanti at the time, and he proposed and was a proponent of a win-win, and I really latched out of that. I thought that was great that we could do win-win, and so that's where communication and negotiations came into it. I think a lot of people view me as a negotiator. I don't really see myself as that, but I think people see me as a negotiator because I like to negotiate things. I don't think everybody has to get their way. I think you find something in the middle. You negotiate, and so when we leave the table, we both have something. And so that's what I would like to foster is that win-win, and also to look at incentives in contracts, because that motivates employees when there's an incentive sitting there.
Thank you. Three-part question. The first, and this was addressed in the initial interview, and I believe the question was asked by Commander Radzik from the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. Chief Lewis, you are familiar with the concepts of situational leadership, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Do you believe that situational leadership is important in public safety? And if so, how would you practically apply those concepts as our next police chief?
Well, situational is, you're going to morph yourself to that situation. It's flexible, and that's kind of the short definition of that. And I think that's what's important here, because if you are a rigid leader, or you are autocratic, or you're just by the book, that sometimes can get results through fear, but you're not always successful. Anyone can switch to that model if need be, but I would rather be flexible, be situational, because in law enforcement, whether it's public safety, law enforcement, even running dispatch operations, we talked about discretion. You have to be able to morph yourself and be a leader and be flexible in those situations. I think you'll be more successful if you foster that.
Very good. Before I open it up for a second round of questions, do you have any comments or questions for us at this time?
No, I'm all set. I appreciate the questions. A couple of them are pretty tough, but hey, I'm good.
You were very precise and detailed. We appreciate that. I do want to make note there's some water there for you, if you would like to help yourself. So again, Chief Lewis, I'm going to begin at the left side of the dais with Councilwoman Mitchell. Do you have any additional questions for our second applicant?
Just one, Your Honor.
Please.
Mr. Lewis, thank you for bearing with us and your discussion tonight. I was listening when you were answering Mr. CEO's question about technology, and I just wanted to clarify what I was hearing and seeing that was correct. You were talking about the 800 megahertz radio system,
That's correct.
and that was a lower cost? Implementing that was a lower cost than the older system?
No,
It was greater?
No, I didn't do a cost comparison on the radios. I was talking about the system, the actual records management system I had in Milan and our CAD system. When I went to a more enhanced, full-blown CAD and RMS system, it was half the cost. That's what I was trying to,
I see.
for
Okay.
clarification.
Okay, so
Yes.
I'm just going to actively listen and make sure that I got it right
No,
this time.
that's okay.
So it was the CAD system that you implemented, it was a better system and it was half the cost, is that right?
It was CAD and RMS. Clemis offers these modules. The two, I guess, main modules are CAD and their RMS system. And then RMS, there's just like a subdomains of different things that you can implement, like you can implement, if you wish, like auto impound. You can implement the ticket module. You can implement all these things. And what you're doing is you're collecting, it's a data-driven approach. You're collecting all this data, and then you can pull the data out, and then you can actually drive your resources with that data. And that's one thing that we're doing is, in Muskegon, is using intelligent policing. And I have like a crime analysis person that we crunch this information. It actually tells us where to go and do our, what we call it, high-intensity patrols, the HIPs. And we do our policing strategies based on what we call DDACs, and that's a very well-known methodology in Michigan. I support that fully. The DDACs, I work with the state police and get reports from them on a weekly basis for our city, Muskegon and Muskegon Heights, and we utilize that information to invoke our service, to what we're going to do. Because a lot of police officers, even back in the day, I would think something's happening over here. So as the squad leader, I'd take them over there, only to find out that I have the wrong information. I just couldn't remember how it really was. Now with the data-driven approaches, it's telling you the time of day, the crime classification, things like that. So that's what you get out of Clemens. And that's why I got that for half the cost. I was pretty excited.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman McClellan?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you're familiar with the Lexipol system and if you would continue to use it or look at alternatives.
Okay. I'm serious. We have some really good policy procedures in Muskegon, but the date they were written, we're starting to see some issues now with them. And actually, last summer, we had contacted Lexipol. We're in that process right now. And we're just enthralled with that because we're going to rewrite all our policies and procedures. I was going to put a committee together, and we were going to do it. It's a very arduous, it's a very difficult situation or difficult task. Lexipol's coming in, and one thing we're really excited about too is in my departments, I'm really big in training. They have a built-in training platform. I've created one at Muskegon, but I'm really excited about their training platform and how they vet it through. They have like a legal department. So when stuff comes to me, it isn't what I think is good. It's actually been cleansed and looked at. It's legal. It will actually be very useful if I use those policy procedures and that training. And just recently, I'm putting a social media, we had one, but it wasn't functioning very, very well. And so that will be helpful through Lexipol. But until then, we just went to put a social media policy in place, an updated one. And right away, my city attorney said, that's not going to fly. I need that type of solid advice because you can quickly put something out there for your policy procedures, rules or regulations, whatever. If they're not legal or they're not written properly, it can cause problems with your staff. It can cause morale issues and things because your materials are not, they don't have integrity. And so that's why I really like Lexipol. And we're actually going there to Muskegon. So I don't know if that was a coincidence or not, but I do fully support the Lexipol system.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Jerrod, anything further?
Yeah, I just have one follow-up. What is your approach to diffuse a tense situation, be it an officer, a citizen, or even a local member of the council?
Those are three different situations. But, and I think we repeated this, is, I want to take this head on when I see a problem. And, but I'll just tell you one of my strategies real quick is for citizens. Sometimes I'll have a citizen call up and they are just really upset. And they're demanding just all kinds of things. My staff will tell me about it. And I'll say, okay, fine, let me have that phone number, let me have that name. So, and sometimes I pause. I do not call them right back. And some people don't like that, but I don't call them right back. And I have found out in my experience, if I just hold off a little bit, do a little research on what they're upset about, I get my staff together as much information as possible, and go back and look at what the complaint is, see why they're upset, look at the background, look at my records management system, see what's up. When I call them back, a lot of times, first of all, I'm prepared to talk with them. I think my communication skills and my demeanor is in the right place. And then a lot of times if I've let a little time lapse before I call them right back, they too have spent time maybe mulling about it, reflecting about it, thinking about it, and almost 9 out of 10 times, it's easier to deal with them. And that's how I deal with citizens a lot of times. It depends on how the complaint comes in. But that's the really upset and I'm going to yell at type citizens, and that happens. So that's how I handle it, and it's been very effective. Obviously, if it's an employee, we just go head on to that. We try to get right in there because we have that background. We know these people. We want to resolve that as fast as possible. And I've dealt with the council members in Milan. I deal with the commissioners because we have commissioners up there in Muskegon. And I'm fortunate to say that I've always had a working relationship with all those people. They don't always agree with me. I did agree with them, though. I'm just kidding. But I've always had a working relationship with them because in our job as law enforcement, a lot of times we think we know the best way. But when I come to that podium and I try to get you to buy into Lexipol, or like in Muskegon, they were absolutely dead set against Taser. Well, that's a technology. And I saw our workers' comp. I saw the officers' injuries. I saw the injuries to the citizens. I went to my commission and said, this has to stop. We need the Taser no matter what you think, what the former administrations thought about Taser. I'll stand behind them. And this is why. They passed it 7-0. They never went back. It's been a very successful tool for us in the community, and our workers' comp has gone to almost nothing. Prisoner injury, even though they get injured by Taser, that's gone down too. We've stopped the fighting, we've stopped the impact weapons, we've stopped all that because of that one thing. But that's how I get along with the commissioners. And I had to have a few conversations allowed by my manager with our commissioners so they understood the technology. They understood where I was coming from. And they wanted assurance from me that I would lead this. And then after it was implemented, I would get in the back and lead from the back. I would have a solid system to watch and to gather information and to make sure that we were operating it properly. And all those were put in place, which gave our commissioners, that assurance that things were going right. So that's how I would deal with the commissioners and the employees and the citizens.
Got it.
Anything else, Mr. Gearbaugh?
No.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Tahar, anything further?
Yes, thank you. You referenced in your answer to Mr. Gerbaugh's question a bit about relationships with the city council and other departments. How would you go about, when you came to Saline, how would you go about building relationships, particularly with other city departments, also with the mayor and city council members, and not exclusively, but could you also talk about how you view that in the context of chain of command?
Well, obviously the chain of command is very important, and I respect that. But besides for that, I'd like to meet and greet individuals. I'm very sociable. I like people. I get to know people. In Muskegon, I know all the department heads. I know all the division heads. And, we meet in various ways. Obviously we meet through our jobs, but I'm more than that. I'm personable. I want to have a conversation. I want to get to know them. It matters to me. And same with the commissioners. I want to get to know them. I want them to get to know me, but there's a time and place for that. I'm pretty much an open book. I want people to learn about me, because if they learn about me, they'll know where I'm coming from. A lot of times if I learn and I know you at different levels, I'll know where you're coming from, or, where I'm getting at. And as I even look at this council, this dynamic council here, I look at Councilman Seal. Well, I know his background, it's law enforcement. When I come in here and I talk about law enforcement, he is my conscience. I mean, he knows what I'm saying. As I get to know Councilman, Jerrod, I'll learn what he's about. And so as you get to know these people, that is what gets you to know them, and then they know you, and because of that, we'll be able to have a better success as I try to change the police department, or I try to keep something the same, or whatever I try to do there. You'll know me, I'll know you, and there's that trust built, that faith that I'm doing the right thing. That's what will come out of getting to know people. And what I'll do is I'll do it one by one. I just go out and meet people. In Muskegon, I've walked downtown. I mean, I do it in many different ways, but especially I was a special event coordinator at Saline, and when you do that, you get to know a lot of people. You have events here. Muskegon, we have about over 70 a year, big events. I'm out there, I get to know a lot of people. Because I'm sociable, I'm personable. It's just kind of my DNA, and I will get to know the people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilwoman Dillon?
Thank you. I would like to ask, how do you view your time management balance of administrative duties versus community involvement?
You got to find a balance there, and sometimes it can get a little out of hand. In Milan, it was relatively easy because the community engagement or the community demand was not as great as I'm facing now. So I could spend a lot of time in my police department working on the operations and oversight and so on and so forth. But I made always a concerted effort to join civic organizations and to go out in the community. And there, it's a little bit different because the demands are a little bit less. I would always go out and do my rounds every day in Milan and go look at the community every day. There's a lot of ways now, technology, all these different ways you can do things. But still the old-fashioned way is just to go outside where it's cold and go look around to see what's going on in your community. And I think that's very, very important, getting out there like that.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Seal?
Two questions, please, Jeff. First of all, just so I understand, you said that the records management system you have in Muskegon is more or less expensive than what we had here in DeClemis?
Well, what it is, it's through a county consortium, so it's paid for by our dispatch center, okay? Which means, we have a regional dispatch, which means very much loss of any kind of control. The price is, I'm not sure what the price is because we don't pay that way.
So your budget is relieved of the burden of that?
Exactly.
I see.
But you
Okay.
pay for this dispatch and RMS and CAD services. But what it does is it limits, like my department, because all departments are not the same. They're just not the same. And so I have departments or we have departments in Muskegon County that are a couple officers. Then I have 80. But we don't have a choice of, when I look at the screen, I see the different modules there, and they're grayed out. And I go, boy, I sure would like internal affairs. I sure would like that gang squad module, and they go, it's not available. Because this community isn't going to pay for it. And if you want to pay for it, it's like $35,000 extra on top. So it stymies the process. That's why with Clemens, we didn't have to worry about that here. It came in, you picked and choose. And those modules back then, I don't know about now, they did not charge you per domain or module.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and I'm not trying to sandbag you because I need to point out that members of the electronic media are present here in the room.
Yes.
But what do you feel the responsibility of the chief of police of any organization is to the media?
to the media? Well, I mean, you are the leader of the organization. You are the voice of that organization, and you have to have good media relations. And I'll tell you, in this day and age, and I'm not going to tell you any different. It is a difficult task now, working with the media and getting information out to them timely. Because like I tell people, cars really didn't get any faster, right? People didn't really get any faster, but the speed of the media now is unbelievable. I've had them call me in my office and ask me about an incident, and my officers aren't even on scene yet. So my way to get information hasn't even arrived yet, and they're asking me questions. It can be very frustrating for them when it appears I don't know. It's not that I don't know, I just don't have it yet. And so we've worked at different ways to deal with that, but that can be quite a challenge because how fast the media is and posting the stories now. Back in the day, I think the Amber News had to print it. Now, like I said, I'm in my office, I read about, let's say, an incident my officer's on. At my desk, this article has already hit the airwaves. It's hit the social media. It's in MLive. It's there. I'm reading about it, and I haven't even been to the scene yet. Because our department's rather large, and I don't go to all the scenes like I would at Milan or whatever. So it is a challenge, but we're up for the task, and there's different ways we do that. I mean, obviously, in our police department, and here too.
Thank you, Councilmember Seo. Well, Mr. Lewis, Chief Lewis, excuse me, we want to be respectful and cognizant of your time. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add or share with us?
No, I would just like to say this, is, I appreciate being finalist here today, you taking your evening to allow me to come in here and participate as a candidate for this next job. I'm excited about this opportunity, and I believe I'm up for that task, and I've spent my entire law enforcement career always working to better and enhance myself. And I think that when the city of Saline makes their decision, they'll have a difficult decision, but I can tell you this, I know my background, my education, what I can bring to this town, and I know chiefs around the state, I know the abilities of people, and I think I bring probably the highest quality of experience and knowledge and education, even my specialized training through the FBI National Academy, Northwestern Staff Command, other things that I've done to make sure I'm the best leader, best executive that you could possibly hire. And even tomorrow I'll be sitting in Grand Rapids, a project management class. Last week I was there for diversity. I never quit training myself and my staff. I bring all that to you, and so I'm just hoping that at some point I can be here in the city of Saline.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments from the dais? Well, hang tight for just a second, Mr. Lewis. I want to reiterate a comment I made earlier this evening in my opening statement, which is clearly we have two outstanding candidates for the police chief's position based on their performance this evening as well as their credentials and resumes. I would encourage my council colleagues to look over that documentation again, to direct any questions you may have to the city manager. And again, I want to confirm that this will be an action item, an item for discussion on Monday's agenda. I am aware that some of you may not be present at Monday's meeting, but as a courtesy to you, I would welcome your thoughts or observations, opinions in writing. They'll be made part of the official record on Monday and then shared verbally if that is your wish. I guess with that, we will conclude tonight's meeting. Mr. Lewis, thank you for your time, and we'd be delighted if you came up to the dais to shake our hands.